Hey, can we thank the band for leading us this morning? That song after was kind of a palate cleanser. It was reminds me of the Pink Panther, the Peter Sellers version, not Steve Martin, where Bruce Lee was Kato. It's good stuff. Well, today we're talking about really a 5-letter word that may bother some of us. It's a word that's hard to come by. It's a word that's evoked to gain your heart, your money, your vote. And simply as we give it, we can instantaneously lose it. Our word for the next 4 weeks is trust. Trust. So I'm going to ask you to trust us on this 4-week ride. Kind of like Aladdin did with Jasmine, if you remember. Or there you are. Do you trust me? But when thinking and planning and praying about this series, we have felt this issue of trust has been bubbling up in our culture. Our culture has trust issues, especially American culture, and has for years now. And 2020 seemed to only make things worse. We had multiple highways of distrust converging at one time. The pandemic, masks, vaccines, the presidential election, economic issues, social unrest. And have you noticed that every single issue that pops up, there are always, almost immediately, 2 opposing views to it, no matter what it is. In fact, there might be a brief moment of unity around an issue, and right after you tweet about it or post it on Facebook, suddenly you realized it's been polarized, and you got to delete it. Because suddenly what you thought everyone would be in favor of, there's an angry group that is not. But not only we polarize from the right and the left, but there are also generational differences that divide us. Each generation may have a different way they want our country and our local communities to function, but our younger generations aren't having it. They're truly tired of what they consider the status quo. Listen to this. This was before the pandemic. I'm sure it's even worse now. But Pew Research found that 71% of young adults felt that people will take advantage of them if they got the choice, if they had the chance. The notion of there being a socialized trust has evaporated from our culture. David Brooks, a journalist, said this: "We are living in the age of that disappointment. Millennials and members of Gen Z have grown up in the age of that disappointment, knowing nothing else. In the U.S. and elsewhere, this has produced a crisis of faith across society, but especially among the young. It has produced a crisis of trust." So instead of telling you about it, we figured we could hit the streets of Austin and ask some people about their thoughts on trust. So let's watch this.
I got a couple questions about trust for you. Who do you trust most in life?
My wife.
That was a good answer. She's gonna be happy with that.
It's funny, we were just talking about this. Probably my father. He's always been the problem solver and the solution bringer when things started to feel like they were falling apart.
Is there anybody you don't trust?
I never thought about that.
What would you say would make somebody trustworthy or not trustworthy?
Money. How they acquire it and why.
When I say the word trust, what do you think of?
This underlying faith that things aren't going to shake you up too bad.
And then what do you think of like politicians? Are they trustworthy?
For the most part, no.
So when I look at politicians, like you're a human being, even if you're president of the United States or mayor of a city, or tell the things that you made a mistake on and how you learn from it, how you're not going to repeat it, but don't tell me all the great things you're doing because it's not true. There's no way with this many decisions you could make 100% right. It's impossible.
Yeah, I really appreciate politicians that just keep going for what they believe is truth and don't shift along the way.
Do you trust the church?
Yes.
Why?
The church is the oldest form of uplifting people and reaching for that higher power to overcome challenges.
Do you think the church is a trustworthy institution?
I mean, mega churches, definitely not. Quaker groups, yes. Along those lines, those are two extremes.
I think for pastors, it's telling the truth in love. Not everybody wants to hear the truth, and sometimes it's hard to say the truth, but if you believe, you have to stick to the truth, but you have to do it in a way that brings peace to people and doesn't feel like condemnation.
Do you trust God?
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm a runner, and that's what I normally tap into when I feel like I need to stop. I just, look up, because once you have that attention mindset to look up and ask for help, it comes to you in your time of need, so to speak.
Gosh, that's a hard one. I think you have to really sink into the idea that he doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, forever. Some of the topics seem different today than in that day, but he doesn't change. And if you can get rooted in that, even though scenarios change and you might not always know exactly how to interpret the scenario in light of what he said, that you just have to know he doesn't change. And that does bring me a lot of comfort.
It's interesting. The film team told me that it was actually really difficult to make this video because no one was willing to stop, almost anyone. And the only ones that were not Gen Z. I don't know if you noticed. In fact, there was one millennial that did the interview and then messaged them later saying, you know what, I've changed my mind. Please don't include me. See, there's a issue of trust in our culture. We assume the worst in people. And the scriptures actually give us a guide into how to build a foundation of trust. And what you see in the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, is actually this description of the two ways that you can go in life. You can go a way that is according to God and his ways, and when you do so, you are blessed. And you can go against God's ways. And the scripture uses the word cursed, which is another way of saying you will experience the consequences of those choices that actually hurt you and hurt others. So in Jeremiah chapter 17, the people of Israel had really just gone incredibly badly. They've gone the wrong way. And in that light, Jeremiah says this: cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert in a salt land where no one lives. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. See, you and I are given the option. Are we going to trust God in his ways, or are we going to trust people more than we trust God? Or for some of us, we've opted for, I'm not going to trust either. And along the way, we reap the consequences of that. See, this is a warning from God that a life without him can be even harder. And as our culture moves further and further away from God, we tend to rely more and more on people, which always leads to disappointment. Especially if the people we're relying on don't have a foundation of trusting God. Now, when I say moving further and further away from God, I'm not just talking about the new atheists that are in our culture, but I'm also talking about those who have their own kind of image of God. And if we're not careful, this could be true of us. See, there are many people in our culture that like Jesus, but they've added to Jesus all sorts of other philosophies and beliefs and their own kind of ideas. It's kind of more of a Jesus plus. And if you follow Jesus, my encouragement to you is to really wrestle with, what am I trusting in? Am I trusting in my relationship with God, or is it all these other things that I might do or not do? Is it superstition? Is it other things that the culture is encouraging me towards? And as open-minded people, my encouragement to you is to really wrestle with this idea. Where am I putting my trust? Jeremiah 17 is written in a way where we get to decide where to put our trust, whether we're going to put our trust in God or in other people. See, what we discover is that we might blame our circumstances but others don't actually choose for us. One of the great gifts that God gives us is the freedom to choose. So what can we learn from this? Well, first of all, trust is about us. Now, we're not taught this in our culture. In our culture, we're told that others are the source of our discontent. We blame others when things go wrong. We feel like trust must be verified before others can be trusted. Trust must be earned, not given. Or that phrase, I remember this phrase, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Remember that phrase? A local man who went on to become president once said, there's an old saying in Texas, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't be fooled again. You got it a little bit off. There's a great quote, though, here from Ernest Hemingway. He said this, the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. It's a true statement. See, here's the thing. You and I, we have trust issues, whether we realize it or not. And some of us have built a wall around our heart to protect us. But in doing so, it also keeps us from experiencing the fullness of love that God has for us. The fullness of love that can be experienced even in the relationship with other people, even broken people. See, I didn't realize I had trust issues until being a part of Gateway. There's this positive peer pressure to keep growing, to never settle, that you've never arrived. And I remember years ago, we went through a series on recovery, and I didn't think that was for me. I've never struggled with drinking alcohol. That was something that had been part of my family, and my mom had been the first one to declare, I'm not going to go the same route as my father and his father. And so I was raised just with this awareness that if I go down that road, I could easily become an alcoholic, like so many of my relatives had been. And I didn't struggle with drugs. And so when I hear of recovery, that's kind of what my mind went to. And I remember, and John Burke, our senior pastor, was saying, we're going to go through the series on recovery, and as teaching pastors, I want you to think about what you need to overcome. And I remember in that moment thinking, well, I don't like to talk about what I need to overcome. I like to talk about what I've overcame. And then as I'm thinking about what I share about, I remember him saying, and if you're not sure what your issue is, choose pride. I thought, well, I don't want to choose that. That's awful. And so I decided I was going to wrestle down with this short temper that I have. Just every once in a while, just comes out. I sound like my dad all of a sudden. It's crazy. But as I began to do the work, I began to realize that actually behind that was anxiety. You see, I had trust issues with God, control issues. That if things don't go exactly the way I think they should, I lose it. And so what was beautiful about going through recovery here at Gateway is it gave me the tools to begin taking personal responsibility for my own life. I no longer had to be the victim of things my parents may have done. I no longer had to be the victim of evil choices that others had made that affected my life. I no longer had to be a victim of circumstances. I no longer had to be the victim of unjust systems or judgmental people. I discovered that I cannot control as much as I want and try to control, but I could control my response to my circumstances and to what others may or may not have done. A quick summary of the first 3 steps in recovery. They're super easy. I am powerless. We all know it, but it's hard to admit it, but we start there. I am powerless, but number 2 is God is powerful. And number 3 is, so I need to surrender to God. If you've never stepped into recovery here at Gateway, it's not like AA or NA. Those are both super important, but it has a spiritual component. It's a connection to God that really helped me grow. I encourage you to jump in. I want to share another passage. This one is from Matthew 14, and it's this remarkable story with Jesus. And I want you to listen to it and think in terms of trust and mistrust. Matthew 14. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. It's such a great story about trust. Let's first look at the disciples. They assumed the absolute worst. Immediately, they see this figure on the water and they just assume it's a ghost. There's no record of any of them ever having seen a ghost, ever before, in their entire lives. Why did they go there? They had active imaginations. They were catastrophizing. Have you ever done that? Something happens and you immediately assume the absolute worst possible scenario. Man, I do this all the time, especially when I was younger, before I started doing this work. And it's amazing how in that moment, you just can go there to the deepest, darkest places. I remember when Deborah and I were first married. This was 27 years ago. We'd been married maybe 2 weeks. And Deborah went out to go shopping, and I was having to study, and she was supposed to be back. In my mind, you go shopping 30 minutes, an hour. 2 hours go by, I'm starting to get a little anxious. 3 hours go by, I think she's dead. I'm a widower after 2 weeks. I was at the side of my bed praying that God would help the police find her in whatever ditch she might be in, and I just assumed the worst. And then I hear her come in. And instead of being excited, I was really angry. And I was like, Deborah, where have you been? She's like, I was shopping. This whole time, 3 hours? What do they sell at Kroger that takes you 3 hours? See, I realized my wife was not dead. She was just late. She was just who she is. But why is it that our minds immediately go to the absolute worst case scenario? The disciples see an image and assume, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. They'd seen Jesus do all sorts of miraculous things. Why didn't their mind go there? Someone is walking on the water. Who do we know that might be able to do that? I don't know, the guy who rose people from the dead, fed thousands of people with just a few pieces of bread and fish. Their mind did not even go to Jesus. In the moment of fear, I wonder, does Jesus even cross your mind? Does your faith take you towards him? When you're stressed, when you're afraid, does your mind go to what could possibly go wrong, or just stay meditating on all that overwhelms you? Or do you take that fear to God? Do you know that the scriptures say 365 different times, fear not, or do not fear? That's one for every single day of the year. I don't think that's an accident. In fact, I want to encourage you to reorient your mind. Instead of the worst case scenario, begin to reorient your mind around a faith-based scenario. And in order to do this, I memorized scripture when I was a young believer. I had a mentor who was an A&M student. When I was in high school, he'd come and meet with me whenever we were in town, and he encouraged me to start memorizing these scriptures. And some of them still, all these years later, pop to mind right when I need them, right when I'm about to catastrophize. I'll remember, wait a minute. God, you said, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for you are my God. You promise that you will strengthen me and help me, that you will uphold me with your righteous right hand. Isaiah 41:10. Or cast your cares upon him because he cares for you. 1 Peter 5:7. Or this one from Philippians chapter 4. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and petition, present your requests to God. And then the peace of God will guard your hearts and mind in Christ Jesus. I love that last verse, because what would happen to me often is I would just worry, which worry is a lot like just praying to yourself. And that does not work, by the way. Next time, I might start praying to God, but it actually gets me more anxious, because then I start saying out loud the things I think that could go wrong. And that's certainly better than just praying to yourself and worrying. But the best thing is to take what Philippians chapter 4 says, is actually move out of worrying and actually be honest with God, but also be thankful to God. Gratitude is a great antidote to catastrophizing. So back to the story of Jesus. He's walking on water, and once he realizes that it's Jesus, Peter says, hey, can I get out there? I love Peter because he was always kind of the boldest. Sometimes that meant putting his foot in his mouth, saying things that were ridiculous. But in this case, he got to walk on water with Jesus. See, he was the first to switch out of a worst case scenario into a faith-based scenario. See, it's when we do that that we can experience the miraculous. Now, it may not be walking on water, but it might even be better. It could be the miracle of rebuilding intimacy in your marriage. It could be the miracle of seeing your son connect with God and overcome his addictions. It could be reconciling with a family member or friend that in this last year, because of all that was happening in this world, you've fallen apart, fallen away from each other. Or maybe the miracle would be overcoming a struggle that you just assumed would be a part of your life until the day you died. Or maybe the miracle would be discovering God's presence, learning to hear his voice in the midst of the stress and the chaos and the disappointment that life brings. Maybe for some of you, that great miracle could be a renewed heart, a chance to start afresh, to acknowledge, God, I have taken all the circumstances in my life, all my frustrations, and I've actually blamed it all on you. But instead, taking that pain to God and asking him to forgive you, to heal you, that what Jesus did on the cross would count for you, that you might start a new relationship with him. But if trust is truly a precious commodity, what are we doing to grow it, to share it, to receive it? Well, number 2, trust is what brings us strength. Where am I expecting strength from? Are we expecting strength to come from God? Like it says in the Psalms 121, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. That's where hope comes from. See, the more we grow to trust God, the more we'll be able to trust in life, because we know even if we deal with people who are not trustworthy, God can bring good out of all of our challenging circumstances. We no longer have to protect our hearts from others because we know that God has our heart, that our value, our worth, our identity, all the love that we need is actually found in a relationship with God. Then we can step out into the world and trust others even when they're untrustworthy and be okay when they hurt us because we know that God has us and can bring good from it. Are we looking to strength from having healthy relationships? There are people that need to be in your life that can actually help you learn to trust again. There's this really interesting verse, 2 Samuel 126. It's David, King David, saying about his best friend, I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. It's an odd verse, I can tell you that, but it's a great verse to describe. As Jonathan died, David looks back and thinks of that time in his life when he was closer to this friend than he ever had been to any of the women that were in his life. This last week, my family, we watched the Friends reunion. I'm not necessarily advocating you go watch that. I'm just saying we did. It's a confession. And in the midst of that, I did like this one moment when the executive producer described the pitch of the show. It's a one-sentence pitch. It's a show about that time in your life when your friends are your family. Have you had people in your life that knew you so well that they could call you out before you even did the thing they knew you were about to do? And they still cared for you. They still loved you in spite of that. For me, I went off to college and I went with my best friend since 7th grade. His name's Craig. And we were roommates our freshman year. And we got along so great. His mom bought us matching bed sheets and bedspread. And then the next year, we added to our group Joe and Pete, the 4 of us. We ended up living together the next 3 years. Got along so remarkably well. And we get into all sorts of prank battles. It started off with water guns, turned into bags of water, turned into dead animals on the front porch. That was not us. That was someone trying to prank us. But we got that guy back. We knocked on his door. He opened it. One of us grabbed him. One of us threw water on him, and I grabbed a vacuum cleaner bag and just opened it up. Pete, who was holding Tony, the guy we were pranking, got it all in his face and mouth. It was awful. We got Hep C shots. Everything's okay now. Everything's okay. But what was really beautiful about living with these guys is we knew each other. We kept each other accountable. And our relationships with God was truly like that verse in Proverbs where iron sharpens iron. We were becoming better men because of our time together. One of those things was when we first moved in together, I remember Pete and Joe had decided to outserve us, which was great for me and Craig. We loved it. And they would do the dishes for us. They would do the shopping for us. I mean, we never had a list. We didn't need it because Joe and Pete would do everything. But one day, it'd been probably maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks, when I walked up to my bathroom early in the morning and Pete was in there scrubbing our toilet. And that's when I thought, what am I missing here? Why are they doing this? So I talked to Craig and we decided, you know what? We're not going to let them outserve us. We're going to outserve them. And so for the next 3 years, we were trying to outserve each other. It was a really amazing experience to live with guys who were really pursuing God and their faith, who knew me and my deficiencies and still cared for me and spoke the truth to me, rebuked me, corrected me, all in love. The four of us eventually all became pastors. What's interesting, though, about that season is in many ways, it's fleeting. And some of us, maybe we're in that season right now, and because of the pandemic, we have lost connection. We don't have that closeness we need with a few friends. And that's why we have youth group on Wednesday nights and college group on Thursday nights. We have networks of young adults called The Anchor. And we have groups that can begin to be that for you. Or maybe you're past that phase. You're in family phase and you've not had that sort of connection like you may have used to in the past. Or maybe you're an empty nester and you've lost all those connections with the people who were raising their kids alongside yours. Every new season requires new intentionality about developing that kind of community. If you're lacking that kind of community, I want to encourage you, go to gatewaychurch.com/connect and jump into a class, a group, a serve team on Sunday, a group that serves during the week. You know, there was an interesting survey done by one of the bigger churches in America a few years back. It was called the Reveal Study. And they were trying to determine which activity helps people grow the most. Is it coming on Sundays? Is it in a life group? Is it serving? Is it serving kids? What could it be? So they did this big study and they were kind of surprised to discover that none of them seemed to be the main indicator of whether someone would grow or not. But the main indicator of whether or not someone would grow is they took personal responsibility for their growth. And then coming on Sundays or serving the kids or serving the poor or being in a life group, all those things helped and moved things forward. That's how they were taking personal responsibility. But it also points out the need to not only dive into groups and into the lives of other people, but to personally spend time with God. If this is the only time you spend with God each week, it's not enough. Our pastor in Los Angeles, Erwin McManus, always says, my job on Sundays is not to feed you, it's to make you hungry. So you'll learn to feed yourself throughout the week and learn to feed others along the way. What are you going to do this summer to grow spiritually? There's this great website. It's called futureme.org. If you go there, you can send yourself an email in the future. It's really trippy. Set it for 10 weeks from now and just send the goals, the things that you want to see happen in your life in 10 weeks. And then you'll get it and you'll be like, oh, wow. And you can see, did I do it or did I not? It's like personal accountability. I remember doing that with a life group, and one of the guys had his list of things he hoped for, and as he shared that with the group, he printed it out, his email that he received from himself, from his past self. And he's like, you guys won't believe it. Look at everything that happened on my list, and even things I didn't write down. And then a woman in our group said in that exact moment, well, nothing on my list happened. It's kind of one of those, kind of ruined the moment. But then she said one of the greatest things I've ever heard in a life group, and I've been quoting her ever since. She said, you know what, though? The difference between you and me is you worked for it. See, there are things that God wants to do in your heart and your life, but it's going to require start spending time in the scriptures. Start reading the Gospel of John. Just read the New Testament. Do you know there are more words in the LA Times Sunday edition than there are in the New Testament? Just read the New Testament, and every time you come across something that doesn't quite make sense, just know there's probably some cultural things. You could do a deeper dive in the future, but I can guarantee if you go to the scriptures, every time you say, God, speak to me, and you just keep reading until you have this sense of what you could do that day with what you've read. Sometimes it might just take one verse. Sometimes it might take a chapter, 2, 3 chapters, which would only take you a couple minutes. Most of the books in the New Testament you could read in a sitting, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They're letters written to people who are following Jesus. But learning to spend time in prayer, even if it's on a bike ride or in the car, or learning to worship on your own. I like to think of the band on Sundays as my backup singers. Learning to connect with God on your own throughout the week. Listening to messages from Gateway or the Bible Project or others that are helping us follow the way of Jesus. When you and I begin to be intentional about spiritual growth, we'll begin to see the results. Some of us struggle to trust people because we don't know what trustworthy people are like. Becoming a trustworthy person and spending time with trustworthy people helps in that as we grow in our relationship with God, as we grow with others. Now, I will promise you this. We say no perfect people allowed at Gateway, and we mean it. We don't want you to ever think we overpromised. No perfect people allowed. And what that means is you will connect with people who have their own level of brokenness. None of them are perfect, but here's what makes a healthy person, someone that you can trust. They're honest with their struggles. And when they say it, they mean it. When they say, I'm sorry, or I forgive you, or I need help. See, that's what a trustworthy person is like. Number 3, trust grows confidence. We grow in confidence in our decision-making. We grow in confidence extended to us by others. We grow in confidence even when the circumstances seem bleak. Maya Angelou has a few great quotes on this. A great poet. She said this, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Don't complain. Or this one, she said, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Isn't that good? Or this one, I do my best because I'm counting on you, counting on me. What if you and I decided to become trustworthy people and learned to open up our heart to trying to trust others, knowing that even if they break our heart, God has our heart. He can turn even the worst of circumstances, the worst of moments into something good. So I want to encourage you this week to do some work. Just maybe one time this week, go on a walk or a hike or just pull out your journal and just start thinking about who are some of the people in your life that are most trustworthy? And what is it about them that makes them so? And who are some of the people that you struggle to trust? And why is it that they are so untrustworthy? Where have you been burned? What grudges are you holding? What are your trust issues? Do the work, even this week. And next week, as we continue this series, Ricky, our student pastor, will be here talking about how to trust people in authority. And 2 weeks later, I'll talk about trusting in our relationships. And then on the 4th week of this series, Carlos Ortiz, our North Campus pastor, will be here talking about healing trust issues that we might have with God. So I want to invite you, wherever you may be in your spiritual journey, just in this moment, to just acknowledge that you might be struggling to trust. Maybe it's struggling to trust God, struggling to trust one particular person, maybe struggling to trust your spouse, your parents, whatever it might be. I just want you to allow this song to be sung over you, and maybe it might articulate what's in your heart, that you need hope, the hope that can come from God.